Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kellye Testy, the president of the Law School Admission Council, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you to Live with Kellye Ken. And I give a special welcome to my co-host, Dean Ken Randall from iLaw. It's great to always be with you, Ken, on this. We have a great topic today. Wonderful topic, the virtual 1L classroom. And we're really excited about this because following the ABA's expansion of Standard 306, including permitting 10 1L credits earned through distance learning, the virtual classroom is really now a reality. And for today's students who are digital natives, this is exciting. And I also want to say that it's exciting for us at LSAC as an assessment company, because we've been seeing just some amazing work being done in the virtual space in terms of very strong learning and assessment protocols from the schools that are getting into this area of digital teaching and learning. So we have a great panel today, and I think it'll be wonderful to hear from them, some of the real leaders in this field. And I know that our candidates and our schools and others who are interested in this topic are always interested in knowing, what is happening, where are things going, what are some of the challenges and opportunities of this new virtual 1L space. So let me introduce who we have with us today, and then we'll begin with a series of questions that my co-host Ken Randall will pose. So first I want to welcome Professor Leanne Fuith, and she is from Michèle, Hamline, one of the real leaders in this area. And so we welcome you, Leanne. Glad to have you with us.
Thanks, good to be here.
I also welcome Professor Jack Graves from Touro Law School. Jack, glad to have you with us. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you, my pleasure.
We also have two deans with us today. First, Dean Megan Carpenter from the University of New Hampshire, a very innovative leader in legal education. Megan, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
It's a pleasure to be with you. And Dean Michèle Alexandre from Stetson University, who has a lot going on in this and many other initiatives at Stetson right now. So Michèle, we're very happy you could join us today.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone.
I want to thank you all for being with us. It's a busy time of year. Hope everyone's had a great Thanksgiving. And with that, let's get into this topic. Ken, I'll turn it over to you for some initial questions.
I chaired the committee that started 306 that regulates distance education. And as Kellye said, it wasn't until 2018 that the ABA allowed for 1L credits. Of course, schools can go beyond the ABA standard with a variance, and two of our schools represented today have a variance. And then we have another wrinkle. New York State has not yet adopted the new standard 306. So Dean Carpenter, I wanted to start with you. Your law school has a program that's gone beyond the ABA standards, and we'd love to hear a little bit about the UNH program.
Thanks, Ken. We are so excited about this program that we launched in August. It is the hybrid JD in intellectual property, technology, and information law. And UNH Franklin Pierce has long been one of the nation's leaders in intellectual property and technology, from left brain to right brain, whether it's music and art or marketing or software and technology, engineering, medicine. And so what we really just wanted to do was to use a hybrid model. We realized that a lot of people who are out there may not be coming right out of undergrad. There are a lot of people who have jobs, and going to law school is expensive. And it's one thing to kind of invest and then go to law school and take out a bunch of loans to go to school. But it's another thing to also have to quit your job and move your house and your family to New Hampshire to get to another city, another state, to get a top legal education in kind of this cutting edge area of the law. So what we decided to do was to create a program that would enable working professionals to stay in their homes and stay in their jobs. And they work on, most of their classes are asynchronous. So people can work, works for all time zones, sort of whenever is most convenient for the student. Like for me, I'm a mom, so I like to come home from work, spend a couple hours with the kid, get the kid to bed, and then I get back to work for a couple of hours. And that's when I learn, that's when I sort of am at my most focused during the day. But the program, involves 4 different immersion periods in, at UNH Franklin Pierce throughout the year. So basically once per quarter, students come for a long weekend, 4 days at a time, for intensive kind of study and immersion periods. And then the rest of it kind of they do from wherever they are. And we really look at it that working professionals bring something important to the learning environment. And we love the diversity of perspectives that we get learning from one another in that space.
Let me move Leanne to you and ask for you to share a little bit about what's happening at Michèle.
Got it. Okay, great. Well, yeah, so I am on the faculty here at Michèle Hamline, and very similar to what Dean Carpenter described. Michèle Hamline received a variance from the ABA in January of 2015 is when we introduced or brought in our first class into our blended learning program, which is similar in structure to what Dean Carpenter described. Our program is entirely asynchronous. We've seen all of the really the same sort of great benefits that Dean Carpenter talked about in terms of the students that are attracted to our program. They're just fascinating second career, third career students, many of them, who bring with them a lot of life experience. And in my role here at the school, I am both on the faculty and I also oversee our career and professional development office. And that is particularly exciting to me as I work with employers and I work with students in the classroom, and I see the needs for the legal profession and the many different areas in which our law students and other law students will go out and do great work. And we really are entering a time in the legal profession when we need people of varied backgrounds and varied experiences in many different areas. And so our blended learning program, as I said, started in January. About half of our student population right now is in our blended learning program. We have had the fortune of graduating our first, I think, about 150 students, 150 alumni now from our blended learning program who are out. Similar to UNH's program, it's asynchronous, and we do have time that the students are need to be here on campus for very intensive in-person simulation weeks, and then they do the remaining portion of their work remotely. And I know we'll get into a lot of these specifics. That's kind of the purpose of our discussion here today. But as from a teaching perspective and from a faculty perspective, it has just been an extraordinary program to be a part of. It's really pushed us and challenged us as faculty members to think about our teaching differently and think about online instruction in new and creative ways, and has, I think we would all, or those of us who teach in this program would agree that it has really opened our eyes to a new way of bringing legal education, and I think that is the topic of our discussion today.
It really is, and thank you so much for that. I know when I'm out talking with many law school candidates, so many that feel like they're place-bound are so excited to see some of the options that are emerging in all your schools. And so it's really great to see that increased access that the schools are affording those candidates. Jack, let me move to you and ask for some opening comments about what's happening at Touro.
Sure. In Touro Law Center's FlexTime JD program, we actually have a program that's very similar to what you've heard about from UNH and Michèle Hamline, and that we're trying to cater to the non-traditional student, someone who would love to have the opportunity to earn a JD and who may well make a great lawyer, but just can't do it in the traditional setting, even the traditional part-time night setting, because he or she has too many family or career obligations and it just doesn't work. So the biggest difference is ours does not rely on a variance. I like to characterize it as simply the latest and best in part-time legal education. Like the traditional night programs, the student goes to school for 4 years, earns a JD in 1 more year than the full-time 3-year program, but doesn't go during the night, doesn't go nights. Instead of 8 nights every 2 weeks, our students go 1 Sunday every 2 weeks. So if you're thinking about travel time, there's a heck of a lot less. Most of our students are regional, but in fact, I've had students from Arizona and Houston coming to New York. So the fact is, if you're coming once every couple of weeks, you can come from a distance. And so even though in New York, as Ken mentioned earlier, the New York Court of Appeals unfortunately has yet to adopt revised ABA 306, so we can't offer fully online courses during the first year. However, I've been doing a lot of online material the first year in the form of a flipped classroom, where I take videos out of the classroom online and do more interactive things in the classroom. And with the Flex Time program, we've taken a third of the traditional first year curriculum and moved it online, which we're allowed to do under the ABA rules, the rules even before the most recent revision. So really what we've done is taken what the ABA allows without having to apply for a variance. And as I'm sure the folks here would say, there are pros and cons to doing it with and without a variance, but you've got a little bit of variety in this panel. You've got some of us doing it with one and some of us doing it without. So that's our program. Flex Time is, again, all about part-time, but part-time with a minimal on-campus commitment. Much of the work is done online.
We actually have two campuses, one in Tampa and one in Gulfport, and I think the online education and the way we structured it has really benefited both part-time students and professional students. So that is students who are in the market already, but desiring either to improve on a field or to attend law school. So a few of the key points that we offer in our online program, while we don't, I'm really excited to hear what my fellow deans and colleagues are doing in their law schools. We are not yet online with our first year courses. What we do is innovate in the first year curriculum and create a substantial component for online pedagogy. So we have flipped classrooms, we have a lot of IT in terms of the pedagogical instruments that our faculty members are using. We have students in the first year curriculum shooting videos to implement the lesson. An example is a faculty member who had the students do videos to capture the concept of remedies. So those kind of things are happening in the classroom. In addition to that, our part-time students are able to take advantage of classroom and our technology while working. So we have a robust part-time program where students start in the first year and their schedule is adjusted. Additionally, we do have a way for JD students to combine additional degrees. So we have an LLM in advocacy and an LLM in health, in elder law. So LLM in advocacy and an LLM in elder law. And they both involve 2 years of online curriculum. So while you are doing your JD, for example, with advocacy, you can also earn in a shorter period of time an LLM in advocacy. And we have heard from students that has allowed them to compete in the market tremendously. And then for working professionals, we have a MJR degree in aging and an MJR degree in health compliance. And they are all 25 to 30 credit online. And that allows working professionals with flexible degrees to really carve out their schedule to take these classes.
Great. Thank you, Dean Alexandre. So, you really brought the discussion beyond the JD to LLMs and masters. And, again, it's about accessible education. I want to ask you a question. Sometimes when we talk about the virtual classroom, we talk about it replicating what happens in the traditional classroom. Dean Carpenter, I'm going to start with you. Is that the way we should look at this equation, that we're trying to do online what we can do in a traditional residential classroom? Or should we be looking for something different with online classes?
I love how Professor Graves is smiling too. I think he agrees with me on this 1,000%. Yeah, not at all. I think that one of the really exciting things about this kind of program is that students are engaged in their learning in ways that they're just not engaged in the classroom. So in a classroom, you can sit, you can sit in the back of the class, maybe tops you might be called on, 2 or 3 times in a classroom setting. But when you're engaged in the learning experience that we have built online, you are having interactions, every couple of minutes that make sure that you are mastering the material before you move on. And it's not just like lecture capture. We don't do anything like that where you're just kind of taking a video of a professor teaching. I have to say that I'm teaching in our program this semester, and it has transformed the way that I will teach in residential classes from now on. Our discussion boards enable really thoughtful, it's not just like, what do you think right now, quick, about this question? It enables the students to really be thoughtful about their legal analysis, and I am grading and I'm seeing what their analysis is to every single question as we go each week through the semester. And these students have just improved by leaps and bounds much faster than I would have anticipated. And I think the intensive experiences by their coming to campus 4 times a year, in those intensive 4-day periods, the students really bond. So even though I noticed that somebody had a question earlier about kind of the asynchronous component, and I almost think that, someone said, I think one of the attendees said that, they're kind of biased in favor of synchronous learning. But I almost think asynchronous is a misnomer, because, you're engaged in this learning experience, but also our professors have office hours every week. And when I have office hours, it's like group office hours. People can make individual appointments, but, we're seeing everyone in their natural habitats. And I might be talking with, 9 or 10 students at once, and people build off of each other's experience. And the students are always engaged, like, all day, every day on Slack, so it's like parts of it are asynchronous for them to learn when they learn best. But it's also this kind of experience that is always sort of experimenting and communicating and reflecting in ways that the residential classroom actually doesn't permit. And so I have just been blown away by the ability of these students to just get the material quickly and also feel like they are their own kind of master of it.
Wonderful comments. I see a lot of nodding heads. Jack, I'm going to start with you, and maybe you can also refer to some of the data analytics that are available from the online platform.
Sure. Dean Carpenter's right. I completely agree with her. The worst of online teaching and learning is that which attempts to replicate the traditional physical classroom. If you think about the timing, legal education is perhaps later than other education, coming to the idea that, gee, we ought to start with outcomes. And any of us who have ever created an online course learned, or hopefully learned, that you start with the outcomes. What am I trying to achieve? And then you reverse engineer the course and think about what's the best way to get there. And the best way to get there online may look very different from the best way to get there in a traditional classroom. And I think most of us on this call or on this webinar probably agree that the very best way to get there is with a mix of online, traditional, online synchronous, online asynchronous, because they each bring different pedagogical opportunities. So one great example, I do a lot of team-based learning. And if you're familiar with that, it's sequence, students work individually, then they work in teams. And I got to tell you, I've tried to reproduce that asynchronously, and it's okay. And I've reproduced it synchronously, and it's pretty good. But the truth is, it's best in a physical classroom. In contrast, I do 360-degree formative assessment based on double-blind peer review, which means students are actually teaching each other. I use a product called Perceptive that came out of Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh, and it's the single best product I've ever seen for teaching first-year students IRAC. But you couldn't possibly do it in a physical classroom. It's all double-blind peer review. You can only do it asynchronously online. So again, there's this whole panoply of tools, some of which work great online, some of which work great in the physical classroom. And if we're thoughtful about it and we start with outcomes and then we think about the best way to get there, then we can do a lot of good for our first-year students. With respect to analytics, every teacher will tell you that the best formative assessment is that which gives the students quick and thorough feedback, and that which allows for prompt remediation where there are holes. That's so much easier to do online. My students take quizzes, they do problems, they engage in discussion boards in an instant. I see where they're learning, I see where they're not. And because the analytical tools that are available to me are right there in front of me and available instantly, I can quickly remediate any problems. I can quickly create a new set of videos, a new set of problems, something to deal with, something where the students came up, or more probably where I came up short in the first time around. So again, all these analytical tools allow us to track formative assessment, track the students' learning real time, and solve any problems quickly, which is the best time to solve them.
I think that's an interesting question as well. And I love the answer to by Professor Graves. We constantly also amending our traditional classroom, and I think the common denominator between traditional classroom and online teaching is that at this moment in time, you have law schools really working hard to innovate the teaching. So online really is a way of having constant engagement with the students. And then, as you stated, Professor Graves, also having the feedback and our ability to track. So at Stetson, we're able to, because we require attendance in a particular way, we really can track engagement. We can track how well the students are doing. So we have an assessment data that's ready and ready to use and to be adapted to the students' needs. And I think that really offers more benefit to students in the long run.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. Professor Fuith, I know you've been nodding your head, and I think you're in agreement, but we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I echo everything that has been said. I think one of the things that is sort of a hang up for those of us that have been teaching in legal education is that this idea of online has always sort of come across to us as a deficit or a barrier or something that we have to kind of work around. And one of the things that has really sort of become clear to me and a lot of the colleagues that I work with here at Michèle Hamline is that this is, if we can stop looking at it as a barrier, it's an extraordinary value add for all of the things that we have talked about here in terms of being able to track our students, being able to reach our students. The word accessibility is used a lot in this discussion, and it is in part accessibility about helping individuals come to law school who have not been able to come to law school for one reason or another, family commitments, professional commitments, things like that. But it's also about accessibility and helping people learn in the ways that work best for them. When I was in law school, I was one of those students in the back row that really needed to kind of hear the information, probably several times over, take it, go home, process it, and work with it in a different way than other students in the classroom. And I think this technology, if we can figure out the ways to use it, and it really is a challenge to people teaching in this area, figure out the ways to use it in order to reach each individual student where they are at, whether they are somebody who is more sort of outgoing or extroverted in the classroom or somebody who is more introverted. This provides us with a lot of tools to really get at each individual student. And to the question that you asked about the data, to really be able to monitor the engagement of our student. Dean Carpenter talked a lot about the engagement that her students have in her courses, and I think all of us probably have very similar programs. Students are engaging every week, multiple times a week, multiple times a day, and we're able to track using our learning management systems which videos they've watched, how far they've gotten through each video, which pages they have looked at in the learning management system, what documents they have read. That's an extraordinary amount of information that we don't have on students in our in-residence program, and it is encouraged all of us to think very differently about how we teach in the traditional classroom versus how we teach in the online environment, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, and how we are making the best use of the tools that are available to us. So it has just been an extraordinary experience on this end.
Yeah, thank you. I love hearing the passion. Jack, you had something?
Just a quick addition. The only complaint I've heard from students with online classes is there's no place to hide. And I think that's a good complaint. And I just couldn't resist adding that after Leanne's comment about the tracking.
It's true.
It was funny because as our students have been studying for exams this semester, they reached out to, during an office hour for civil procedure, I think last week, they were talking about how they feel so sorry for our residential students because the residential students can't go back and like engage with a particular topic with the professor in like a recorded lecture or a particular pathway. And that they are kind of, you know, they narrow down on where they need additional help, and then they go and really focus in on those areas. And that it just clicked something for me that I realized that we're kind of missing out on opportunities residentially that we should be taking advantage of as well.
Absolutely.
You know, thank you. I want a couple other areas I want to pursue a little bit. I want to talk about skills training. So, you know, 25, 30 years ago, legal education started to focus more than ever on skills training with externships and internships and with clinical opportunities. How do we teach some of the skills online? Does technology have an advantage over residential teaching, since so much of the practice of law is practiced by technology? And I'll throw it out to the four of you and pick who wants to jump in first on skills training.
Well, I'll chime in, and I think you touched on it, Ken. These are the skills that our students are going to need to have when they go out into practice. More of our engagements with other lawyers, with the courts, with co-counsel, opposing counsel, with our clients are happening through electronic means. And so this is an extraordinary opportunity for us to help our students figure out how to engage in those ways. And part of it is about using the technology, but part of it is about developing lawyering skills and developing a means of connecting with someone on a personal level, developing those interpersonal skills, the skills in the area of client counseling and advising, and understanding how you come across to someone when you're sitting across the table from them, or when you are over a Zoom connection with them, or when you are over the phone with them. So it's an extraordinary and a necessary opportunity. I teach a skills course in our blended learning program that focuses on client counseling, negotiation, and contract drafting with our students. And it was a course that I taught in our in-residence program. A colleague of mine and I taught it together, and we had to convert it from our in-residence program to our blended learning program, where the students were with us for one very intensive week in person, and then the rest of it they did remotely. And you know, we sat down and sort of puzzled through what is the best way to teach client counseling and to teach negotiation skills remotely. And there are a variety of different ways that we've been able to employ. The students negotiate with each other separate and outside of class, offline. They connect with each other via Zoom. They connect with us for client counseling or client advising sessions via Zoom or in person. And you figure out sort of what the best use of the platform and the time that you have. And it's been a very sort of successful way of taking a purely skills-oriented class and finding things that make sense for them to do in their remote time, and then really leveraging the time that we have in person together. When we are together for those intensive weeks, we do very little sitting in our sort of large traditional large classroom environment. We are in small groups, we are in mid-sized groups, and we are constantly moving in different configurations to practice those skills.
If I could just follow up on Professor Fuith's comment that when thinking about teaching skills training, if we're thinking about teaching skill training for the future of lawyering, this may well be what it looks like. I think it was 4 years ago, I chaired a panel on the future of international commercial arbitration online. And if you think about it, just getting together the number of people you need to put in a physical room is incredibly expensive, particularly if you've got a long arbitration, because everybody's got to block out all their time. As soon as you start allowing people to participate in a room like we're doing today, from their own space, even if it's all at the same time, it gets a lot less expensive. It gets a lot easier. On the other hand, if you're going to engage in some sort of advocacy, as I'm sure Dean Alexandre can tell us more about, if you're going to engage in advocacy, it's a different medium. And effective advocacy in this medium is a little different than the physical courtroom or a physical conference room involving an arbitration. So I think to the extent that we're teaching skills like advocacy, doing it in this sort of an environment is great. And then if we want to move to more and more peer review, again, we've talked about that. You can do that asynchronously. You can do it with the sort of video interactive videos that students create that Dean Alexandre talked about. So I think we can, once again, I think we can do better. I hope we can do that because this summer I'm actually teaching the evidence part along with a colleague who's teaching the trial practice part, doing in our FlexTime program, a combination evidence trial practice course. I know Stetson historically taught it that way. I taught it that way in the past at Colorado. So I think it gives you an opportunity to really do a better job of teaching skills for the future of lawyering if we think it through.
Just on Stetson, we also kind of ramping that up a bit by introducing the virtual courtroom. So because we rely so heavily on one-on-one in advocacy and trial practice, it doesn't mean that we can't also educate through online programming. So the virtual classroom is a way to actually train real skills in real time and as often as possible while using technology. So that's definitely something, just to follow up on what you're saying, that just because we have a traditional notion of skills, and obviously like the hybrid programs or the flex program, some of it does involve some one-on-one. However, the technologies make it more possible to have a variety of options. And the other skills component in advocacy is through writing. And we have professors who are offering writing programs wholly online. And that is to perfect the advocacy component that is the lawyer's calling card. So go ahead.
No, I think what you're saying is so interesting. I might just add that one of the things that we've done for a long time, the last 20 years or so, is to have a program that's really modeled after medical residencies, where people are embedded in a company or a law firm or a court for a semester up to a year while they're in law school working. So it's kind of like an externship. But through that, through our decades of experience with that program, we've gotten really good at engaging students in whether it's law review or journals, student organizations, all those opportunities that I saw a question come through earlier, sort of asking about that might seem challenging. When you think about it, really the practice of law in so many ways is based on technology, and we communicate with one another using technology. We aren't in that kind of Andy Griffith world anymore where, like a client might just sort of wander in, or prisoner it's not that kind of face-to-face, that we engage in communication with, in our professional situations all the time. And so that's something that I think these programs really take advantage of and prepare students for what the practice of law is really all about. And one example of that is that, because we've been doing IP and technology law for so long, a lot of our alumni are kind of leading in the IP space. So the head of IP for Microsoft or Pepsi or Bayer, those are all our grads. So we're doing this class for our hybrid program and our residential program in Silicon Valley in January. And so for a week, we're going to go and we're going to have this intensive immersion period where our students are going to take a business strategies course in IP. And it's being taught by, the head of IP at Microsoft and Facebook and Google and Uber and Apple and Samsung. And they're talking about these seminal cases in that area, and they're giving the students skills training kind of in person. And at the end of the week, the students have really built not just kind of skills to develop sort of strategies, but also then the network they've expanded as well. And so, these kinds of programs of looking at learning in a different kind of way, enables the students to get access to people and experiences that would be very difficult in the traditional classroom setting.
So let me put together a few themes that are coming across from our viewers. And not surprisingly, one of them is asking about the relationship of the quality of these programs to bar passage, and whether how you're all thinking about the preparation for licensure that the students necessarily need, and what you're seeing there or expecting there, given that some of these are very new. And so that's one area that I'd love to hear some of your comments on. The other area that students are also thinking about is, of course, cost, and whether they're eligible for scholarships as they might be in the residency programs, and just how they should be thinking about the financial investment that this requires. So maybe we could start with those two biggies, the cost and scholarships and bar pass. And Leanne, maybe start with any comments you want to make, and give each of you a chance to address that.
Sure, that sounds good. Well, just briefly, in terms of the preparation for licensing and bar passage, I'm sure my colleagues at the other schools will share this as well. Our students in our blended learning programs that are engaging with the classroom content in both in person and remotely do all of the same bar preparation that students in our traditional in-residence program do. We are probably the ones that are kind of furthest along, because we are the ones that created the first program, and so we have had students in our blended learning programs for the last several years, and as I mentioned at the outset, have graduated students, and the sort of process of tracking the data is somewhat more complicated in terms of bar passage when you have students taking the bar all over the country, as we do, but the passage rates are consistent between the programs. There is not sort of a measurable difference. And so we have, and they're going through all of the same instruction. We have a partnership with Kaplan as part of our curriculum that helps prepare students for sitting for the bar exam. We also do that bar preparation both in the in-person format as well as in the online format, again, speaking to sort of the different modes and how they engage students. With respect to the cost piece of it, students in the blended learning programs as well as our traditional in-residence programs have the same access to scholarships and all of those types of things to help manage that. And obviously in the in-residence or in the blended learning program, most of our students that are in that program are part-time and they are continuing to work. And that's really the value of the program, is to be able to manage your financial commitments, personal commitments, and professional commitments together.
Very good. Jack, let me ask you for any comment you have on those items.
Sure. We just started our second class, or our second cohort in the flex time program. So I don't have any graduation statistics yet or bar exam statistics. However, we have a program, a diagnostics program, where we have an external provider who does bar prep that provides us with diagnostics that we administer at the end of each core course. And they're the same questions, for instance, for all the contracts courses, for all the torts courses. So it gives me an opportunity to compare how are the students in one section doing in another. And for this purpose, how are the students in the flex time program doing against our traditional day program, our night program, and bottom line, our first two cohorts thus far have been performing as well as or better than any of our other cohorts, despite the fact that our inputs, our incoming student credentials, are essentially the same. So thus far, based on the objective data that I've got, the flex time pedagogy is working as well as or better than. I would just, to follow up on what Professor Fuith said, the cost is the same, scholarships are the same, all of that's the same, but to the extent that you not only have a part-time program, but that you make that program more flexible, the student has to make less other compromises like moving, changing jobs, working less hours, which means that there's a lot of other costs the students avoid. So I think with most of these programs, they're essentially the same price as the standard residential program once you get through the 4 years, but the ancillary costs are dramatically reduced.
Very helpful. Good. And let me ask our two deans. I know you're always thinking about cost and bar pass. So Michèle, you first, and then comments from Megan to follow.
Thank you. So our bar passage rate, I would agree, remains competitive with regardless of who the students are, part-time and full-time students measure whether they take online classes or not. They measure in a competitive way. We also focus singularly on our ability to offer accessible bar prep to our students. That means that we have a cohort of courses that we make accessible to all students, and in those group of courses, we also infuse online component in it in order to make sure that wherever the students are, they can take those courses. And we've seen a huge spike among our students in a demand for those courses like Florida Overview. And this year we are rolling out multi-state strategy and be able to offer residence program as well as flipped classroom to really address the different way of learning. So this is what we really trying to take to stay in tune with our students' way, different learning mechanism and their access, etc. In terms of cost, we try to pay as much as we can and support students. We offer adapter bar. We also offer bar scholarship. And generally, we have a competitive type of financial structure that allows students to compete for scholarships.
Thank you so much, Dean Alexander. Dean Carpenter?
With regard to tuition, I have scholarships available equally to our hybrid students as we do our residential students. On bar passage, that's something that we have long excelled at in general, and I think part of it is that we really build bar prep in from the very first semester of the first year of law school. In the spring of the 1L year, our students take a preliminary bar, and we're working with Barbary right now to kind of assess the performance on the preliminary bar, and to give us kind of written diagnostics on how each of the students does. And then depending on how the students do on a particular section, we have different academic success or academic support tracks that the students can take advantage of to build the skills that they need from the very beginning. So we really do start bar prep early. And it's one thing, part of the reason that we do that is because our school has long attracted, we are in New Hampshire, but the vast majority of our students come from outside the state. And so we'll have students taking the bar all across the country, whether, 14 jurisdictions, 18 jurisdictions, 20. And so we need to make sure that students are prepared, not just in one or two states or in a region, but that students are prepared to take the bar exam in whatever state they're interested in practicing. So we really feel like it's incumbent upon us to build that into the curriculum from the very beginning. And we're doing that with the hybrid students equally as the residential students. And we've seen fantastic results with the implementation of that preliminary bar.
Great. Thank you all for those comments. I know a number of our candidates that are viewing are asking about, just making sure they can get full information about your programs and other programs. And so I want to remind everybody that after this program is over, we post this webinar at lsac.org, and it's also posted on iLaw's website. And we will make sure that along with that posting, we list conveniently for everyone any programs that students that are of this nature, so that students have an easy place to see some of the options that they have today. And I also just want to note too, I'm also seeing a lot of questions from candidates just about the type of pedagogy that's used in legal education today. And I want to note that, if you have your idea of law school from movies or from maybe when your parents went to school, come see for yourself what happens in legal education today. The faculty are very devoted to students. The types of learning that happens in the classroom and in these online programs, a lot of different methodologies of assessment, a lot of devotion to the entire student learning journey. And I think we've come to really understand that it starts with the LSAT skills of reading comprehension and logical and analytical reasoning. And then that really carries over into what it takes to be successful in school. And the schools are very good about also understanding that licensure is part of that professional journey and providing that support that students need along that way. And I never like to speak to any public audience without reminding students that there's a wonderful free tool out there at the Khan Academy, Khan. It's free LSAT prep, and it helps build exactly the skills you'll need to succeed in any of these programs. So with that, Ken, I want to turn it back to you because I know you had a couple other questions and wanted to give our terrific guests some opportunity for closing remarks as well.
Yeah, thank you, Kellye. Dean Carpenter, you touched upon really what I want to ask about in my next question, which is things that really go beyond the classroom. And you mentioned Law Journal and externships. Can you talk about other student services, career services and jobs? And we'll start with you, Megan.
Yeah, we have, we have a class that the students take they start it in the fall of their first semester. And then we really hit hard on this class in the spring of the first year, called the Introduction to the Legal Professions. And that class is the beginning of working with the Career Services Office to tailor to figure out what your individual path is and what your career goals are. Through the class, you get exposure to 50 or 60 attorneys doing in different areas of practice, doing different types of things. You develop one or two mentors throughout the semester. And then those will last throughout the course of your time in law school. And you develop a roadmap with an individual career services counselor that is sort of, helps us look for the kinds of jobs that you're interested in and helps focus you on perhaps areas that are of interest to you as well. But part of it is that, we want to enhance your professional opportunities while you're in school. So in the hybrid program, all of our students participate in one of our clinical experiences. So you will represent clients, whether it is in copyright, trademark, patent issues, representing small businesses, who are just kind of getting started in business transactions. Or, one of our other clinics is working with the Department of Commerce. We partner with them to help economies transition around the world from old economy to new economy. So we're working with Sri Lanka and Algeria. And so by the time that you graduate, the students have so many different professional experiences, not just the job that they have while they're in school, but part of their learning is really engaged in professional activities as well. So our job placement rate for the school overall is in the top 6%. I think we're ahead of Harvard and Yale for our open market job placement. And I think that's because we start from the very beginning and really help customize it for what you're interested in and don't take a cookie cutter approach.
Great. Thank you, Dean Carpenter. Professor Fuith, I see you nodding, and I want to hear what your program is now 4 or 5 years old. I want to hear about what your school does with career services.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I am on the faculty. I also oversee our career services function within the school. So this is an area that's kind of near and dear to my heart. Our students, regardless of the enrollment option that they come into at Michèle Hamline, they all have a career advisor who is uniquely assigned to them that follows them through their career, their sort of tenure at Michèle Hamline, whether they are in our full-time program, our part-time program. And that person is really matched with them to help them chart their course. What are the kinds of things that they need to be doing inside of our building or in our virtual classroom? And what are the kinds of things that they need to be doing in their own unique community? In our blended learning program, when the students come to campus for their in-person time, we have time in the classroom with them to go to work on some of those professional development, professional identity formation type issues that as lawyers, lawyers and law students, we work through all through the course of our legal education as well as into our legal practice. We also, for our students, have a similar course to the one that Dean Carpenter mentioned. And for our blended learning students, that course comes a little bit later in their program. One of the things that we have observed is that for the blended learning students, one of the big kind of points of professional development questions, professional sort of identity type things that they're thinking about happens as they are starting to think about, when do I make the jump? When do I leave the professional career that I have developed for myself? And when do I make that transition into practice? And it comes with a lot of questions about, you know, am I starting over, and salary implications, and how you continue to balance personal obligations with this sort of professional path that you have carved for yourself. But in that course, it's called Foundations for Practice. We do many of the similar things. We talk about sort of the professional skills and competencies and characteristics that lawyers need. And within the blended learning program, many of our blended learning students are uniquely suited for some of those skills, characteristics, and competencies. So we also have a really robust externship and residency program for our blended learning students. We have a team of folks in our career and professional development office that partner with our full-time tenured faculty to help students find externship placements, and residency placements. At Mitchell Hamline, a residency is an externship, but it is more time intensive. It's a more immersive experience later on in their program. Help them find externships or residency opportunities in their home communities through our alumni network, through connections that the students have in their own home communities. One thing that we've briefly touched on here is this idea of developing community. And I think one of our sort of biggest learnings is that extraordinary community can be developed in these online programs among our students here in the Mitchell Hamline campus. And one of the things that we really focus on and try to prioritize is helping our students take that back and bring their legal education and bring the expertise they develop back into their communities. And so our career services staff and faculty are really focused on that.
Great. Thank you, Professor. In our last couple of minutes, I want to be sure I give each of our participants a final couple of minutes just to conclude with anything you think we didn't cover but should have. So Dean Alexandre, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Ken. What I would say, I would go back to what Kellye was saying earlier, which is that law schools today are different than anything you could ever imagine from popular media. This is a really exciting time in legal academia. So in addition to everything my colleagues have discussed, I'd like to really encourage students to think about all of the innovation happening in law school. So like Mitchell Hamline and other schools, we have a diagnostic test. And that really is connected not only to figuring out how students are doing, but to another key component, which is to have individual attention given to students from day one. And to have that day one be the result of deliverables like the placement and the perfect job for you, rather than the job that is told to you that you should have. So that's different from anything you can think of with what you heard about law school, so that we have comprehensive offering in career placement, we have comprehensive offering in educational component, but we also have the special attention that is given, special focus, mentorship program that goes beyond the parameters of the physical presence of the law school so that you can be guided in your career. But we also have these kind of locating students where they are at in order to help bring you to your full career. So please listen to what my colleagues have said and also investigate all of what law schools in today have to offer.
Great, thank you, Michèle. Wonderful insights. Dean Carpenter, I know you're about to get on a plane to go to India. You are kind to spend time with us, but we'll let you wrap up next, please.
Thank you. I apologize for running after this, but and so if you all want to email me for questions about the program, I'm going to be stuck on a plane for the next day and a half. So don't hesitate to email me. I will be a captive audience. I just wanted to say, that our program is really the first specialized hybrid program that is in a specialized area of the law. And we're doing it in IP and technology law. I think it's really a perfect choice for the first specialized degree, because it's relevant. It really dominates our economy, and it in so many ways is sort of, presents questions of some of the most important questions that we face in all areas of industry and technology, privacy. I mean, whether it's issues of social justice or issues in the corporate boardroom. And while our program is really the first of that kind, I do not think it's going to be the last. This is my son, by the way, who is kind of hoping my plane gets canceled to India. So, okay, Harlan, can you go? Thanks. So
this is really work-life balance.
Yeah, right. And so, with IP, I think we're going to see, other specialized degrees in other areas going forward. But IP is really sort of the first foray. And one of the things I want to say to you all is that those of you who are interested in exploring programs like these, you have the opportunity to be a pioneer right now. I mean, this is not kind of what people think of as like online learning, like you're just taking some online classes, and this is not lesser than. This is transforming legal education in ways that is just blowing it up. And it is such an exciting time for that. And you have an opportunity to kind of get in on the ground floor and be one of those pioneers. And so I would just, whatever program is right for you, and as you explore your options, don't forget to just feel incredibly excited by this chance to make a difference